Let's pray. God in heaven, we thank you for being with us tonight. We thank you for this day of grace that's now drawing to a close. We pray that you would bless us with your word tonight, pour out your Holy Spirit in us, that we might find hope in your promises, God, and more than that, help us to find hope in the promise maker. Because God, when you speak, you do not lie, you do not change your mind. Your promises, once spoken, will come to pass. Lord, lead us to hope in you and the promises you make. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Do you ever think about some of the things that make it really, really hard to be a follower of Jesus? We've been talking about in these midweek services kind of the long race picture. It's a marathon, not a 100-meter dash. I think that's hard. Just the sheer fact that the race is long. If it was, you could do anything for 10, 15, 20 seconds. But now ask me to do it for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours in terms of a marathon. Now ask me, I can do anything for a week in my life. But ask me to do it for a lifetime. And now it's a lot harder. One of the things that challenges us as Christians is just faith fatigue. It's hard to stay the course. It's hard because, think about some of the other things that make it hard. It's hard because of temptation. It would be one thing if we could run a race without any hindrances, without any hooks or lures hanging in the way. But now all of a sudden we're a fish swimming for a goal, and the devil likes to hang a little lure in front of us. Come over here. Or come over here. And now all of a sudden you're chasing here and chasing there, and the danger is the devil's going to lead you off a cliff on this side or a cliff on this side, and you lose it. It's hard. It's hard because, have you ever noticed that sometimes the temptations aren't necessarily bad things? The distractions of life? Working a job is a good thing. Having possessions is a good thing. Having money in the bank is a good thing. But now all of a sudden you hang that out there as the ultimate thing, and now it becomes a distraction and takes your eyes off of Christ. But as I think about the things that make it hard to be a follower of Jesus, I think one of the hardest things for us to cope with, and I think you see this in all kinds of people who struggle in their faith, it's when something hard happens. Trials, difficulties, hardships. When life is hard, it's a little easier to run the race when life is easy. But when life is hard, it's easy to say all kinds of things about God. I think about Abraham's life. What were some of the hard things about Abraham's life? Just without Isaac in the picture, what are some of the hard things about Abraham's faith walk? Just throw some at me. Remember his story.
He was a nomad.
He was a nomad, so that meant he was always on the move. As Americans, we're so settled. Abraham, I don't know, but he didn't stay in one place too long. That's hard. What else is hard for Abraham?
His wife was starting to doubt.
His wife is doubting, and he starts to doubt too. So you're running this race, and the person who's supposed to be with you isn't quite with you all the way. What else is hard?
Waiting.
25 years by the time promised to fulfillment. That's a long time. That's a quarter of a lifetime if you make it to 100.
And his closest relative left him.
Lot. And Abraham still loves him. We're not even going to talk about Lot. Right? Lot goes off to Sodom and Gomorrah, chases the better land, and Abraham has to pray for him and then go rescue him. There's a lot of things that are hard about Abraham's life, and I think probably the one that we ran into tonight, I think maybe the hardest. Think about this. At this point in At this point in Abraham's life, I'm trying to think what pictures I have out there. At this point in Abraham's life, we're probably, so from promise, Abraham's 75, Abraham's maybe 110, around there. Isaac is a growing boy. He's not this, just so you can understand, Isaac is not this babe in arms when God says sacrifice him. Abraham is a growing young boy. Some people think puberty, young teenager, maybe 10 to 13. It's hard to say, but he's a growing boy. So Abraham, he's been waiting for this boy for 25 years, and now maybe he's had him for 10 years, and his heart is full. Do you notice how God talks to Abraham about his son? Take your son, your only son, the one that you love. This was a dear, dear son. A dear, dear boy, because of the promise. And then what does God ask him to do? I want you to take that boy. You can almost feel the knife twist a little bit. I wonder if that's a little intentional as God molds Abraham. Take your son, your only son, the one that you love, and take him to the mountain I'll show you. Part of this is a test for Abraham. God wants to teach him something. But Abraham is amazing in all this, I think. He actually says, okay, God. And then, did you notice this? How hard this must have been? So they go. And then Isaac looks at him, Dad, where are we going to get the lamb? Because he understands what's about to happen. And how did you see what Abraham does? He helps his boy understand God's going to take care of this. And can you imagine the thoughts in Abraham's mind? Here, carry some wood, son. And now if you're 110 and your son is 10, and you build this altar of stone and you put some wood on it, you're probably, if I'm 110, I can't imagine picking up Johannes and saying, so now Abraham has to convince his son to get up on that altar, and then he has to tie the ropes to bind him, and then he has to raise the knife to kill him. I can't imagine as a dad, let alone the dad of a child who is a child of promise. I can't imagine going through that. Just imagine some of the thoughts that must have gone through Abraham's mind. Are you crazy, God? Did you all of a sudden change your mind about this promise? And you almost get to the point when God asks you to do that to a son that you love, a son of the promise, don't you almost start to ask God, if you're Abraham, God, are you my friend anymore? God, have you become the enemy? Because now God does not seem friendly. If you look at this from the outside, God does not seem friendly. He seems very much to be the enemy of what's good for salvation and what's good for Abraham. And perhaps that's where, when hard things happen in our life, when hardships come, when trials come, when temptations come, just think about your reaction to this. If you're going through something hard and somebody blurts back, God works all things for the good of those who love him. How quickly don't you say, sure. In your head you know it's true, but in your heart you're almost pushing back and saying, I can't hear that right now. Just leave me alone, because it doesn't feel good right now. You almost feel like, at moments like that, God, you don't love me anymore. God, you're not being good to me right now. God, I don't understand what you're doing. This hurts a lot. Leave me alone. It's better to have enemies than to have a friend like this. So what I want to do, and I'm walking you through that because I want to teach you, and this is what's in your fill-in. I want to show you something about Abraham's faith. Because let's just look at a couple of things. I just want to highlight a couple of these verses. Look what Abraham says. Look at his faith. If you look at verse 5 in the text, what does Abraham say to the servants? We will go, and then we will return. So Abraham, he's going up the mountain to sacrifice his son, and what does he fully expect? Isaac and I will come. I'm going to go up there, I'm going to sacrifice my son, and then the two of us, we're going to come back down. And I don't think Abraham was just saying that to appease the crowd. Look what else he does. He tells his son, God will provide a lamb for the burnt offering. And then what does he actually do? He raises the knife to kill his son. Abraham trusted God all the way through. So let me show you a couple of things. First of all, faith holds the promise no matter what it sees. I mean, think about, what does Abraham see right now? He sees God say, sacrifice your son. He sees God actually get him all the way to the point that he's going to do it. This was not like a bang, bang, bang situation where you don't have time to think. These are days. Days are passing. Abraham sees all this, and yet what does he know? He believes the promise. Look at, this is where the writer of the Hebrews helps us a lot. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. So, do you see what Abraham holds on to? And maybe this is part of the test. Are you going to hold on to Isaac? Or are you going to hold on to the promise? What was it that Abraham embraced? What was it that he held? He held the promise. The promise that said, it is through Isaac. There wasn't going to be another kid. It was through this boy, this Isaac boy, this child of laughter, that God was going to count all the blessed nations. Through Isaac, your offspring will be reckoned. And Abraham goes so far as to think to himself that he imagines a way that God's going to keep the promise. God's going to raise him back from the dead. I'll do this, and then God will raise him back. But do you see what Abraham's holding? He's holding the promise. Even though what he sees and what God tells him seems to be so opposed to each other. So now think, what are the promises that God gives us when we are going through something really hard? What are some of the promises that you know? I'll share a couple, but what are some of the promises that you know that God says to you when you're going through something hard?
You won't be alone.
Okay, God says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. The flames will not sweep over you. The waters will not go over you. The flames will not set you ablaze. That's Isaiah 43 or Matthew 28.
He will help you on the right path.
Okay, so God will guide me. What else?
Promises that very son.
Yeah, God promises that God promises each one of us that through this life, through his son Jesus, heaven is ours. So this place that's sometimes so hard, this is not our eternal place. Heaven is our home.
Nothing will separate us from his love.
No matter what comes, nothing can get between us and God. Nothing can separate us from God.
We will always be his child.
Yeah, I've adopted you as my child. You are my very own. You're mine. And I know these are the ones that you don't really want to hear, but 1 Peter 1, you can look it up later, 1 Peter 1, what does God tell us about trials and hardships? It's through these trials and hardships that God purifies our faith. These trials, Peter says, that you're going through, this is for your faith, this is for the good of your faith. In Hebrews 12, what does the writer say? He says these things are discipline. And what is the heart of discipline? Teaching. Put two words together, discipline and disciple. Both are teaching. The disciple is taught. The discipline is how they're taught. So what God is doing for Abraham through this, what God does to us and for us through discipline is teach us. Or the one that everybody kind of knows, Romans 8. And there's so much in Romans 8. You know the part of God works all things for good. But keep on reading. If God is for us, who can be against us? Keep on reading. God didn't spare his own son, but gave him for us all. How will he not also along with him graciously give us all things? And keep on reading. Who shall separate us from the love of God? Shall trouble or hardship or nakedness or danger or sword? No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. These are just some. We spouted off about 6 or 8 of them. These are just some of the many promises God has made. But what's even greater than the promises, so point one is faith holds the promise, no matter what it sees. What's even greater than the promise? And what's even more important than the promise? The promise maker. Because if I were to tell you, I will be with you wherever you go, you would say, psh. Even if I wanted to and could, I couldn't. And I can tell you certain things that I'll try to do for you and whatever it is, but as a promise keeper, I'm not super great. In fact, I've learned with my kids, don't make promises because you will let them down. Right, Madeline? That's why I'm very careful with my words. I always try to throw a maybe in there, or perhaps, or as God lets me. Right? But look what Abraham does. Where is Abraham's faith? Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. So Abraham doesn't know what God's going to do, but he knows God, and he thinks he knows what God's going to do. God's going to raise him back. But where is his faith? His faith is in his God who made the promise. So faith holds the promise maker, no matter what it feels. And now think about it. Let's just again, this is like Bible study a little bit. What are some of God's characteristics that makes him somebody that we can trust?
Never change.
God never changes. Who God is never changes.
It's all powerful.
He's all powerful. So when God makes a promise, can he actually follow through on it according to his power? There are things that I might want to do, but I just don't have the oomph to do them. There are things you want to do, but you don't have the oomph to do them. But God does have the oomph, and a little more than oomph, right? He's all powerful. What else?
He's all-knowing.
He knows everything. So when God says this is what's good for you, he has the knowledge to be able to say this is good for you. Whereas I look at my kid's life and you look at other people's lives and say, well, this is what I think is good for you. But I have this much view, and God's appeared and has all this view. He's all-knowing. What else? Yeah, he's the maker. Think about what he's done, what he's made. What else? You got
He
it.
actually knows what's best for us.
He knows what's best.
Way more than we do.
You have to keep going. Way. She said way more. He knows way more than we do about what's good for us. You got two omnis. You got all present, all powerful, and all. Well, no. Sorry, I gave it to you. All present, ever present. So where we are, he is there. And start coupling this together. The all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present, never-changing God is all-loving, gracious, and merciful. So the things that God does for us, the things that God plans for us are out of love for us. Does God do this to torture Abraham and to make him suffer? No, it's because he loves him and he cares about him. He knows what's good for him, and he wants Abraham to trust him more. Faith holds the promise maker no matter what it feels. And the thing is, we've already kind of said this, but God does not disappoint. God does not disappoint. Look how God did it for Abraham. This is the end of the account. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham, he said. He replied, do not lay a hand on the boy, he said, do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Uh-oh. Press the bottom right there on us. Right there. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. You know, I don't know. Abraham never imagined this. Abraham imagined that God was going to raise his son from the dead. But God did something better, didn't he? He not only provided a substitute for his son, but he gave us a picture of what God was going to do for us by his son. That God would provide a substitute for us in the little baby that we're going to celebrate his birth in about a week. And sometimes we try to figure out, why am I hurting right now? What is God doing in this? We might think we know, but we don't. We don't have a clue. But this is what we do know, that God has something way better in mind for us. Way more than we can imagine. And it's going to be kind of like this. I think we'll be surprised. If God ever lets us in on the secret, I think we'll be surprised at the good things that God has for us. But the simple thing, I'll just say this. Simple thing. Hold on to the promises of God and hold on to the God who makes the promises. Because God does not disappoint. He hasn't yet, and he's not ever gonna. Amen.